Okay, welcome to XML the movie version of the blog. What I'm going to do is I'm not going to go into as much detail as I went into the blog. I'm just going to take you through the process that I actually used to correct the files that I had. So if I show you what I started with, I've got two files, an XML file, and if you open it up, I was given this and was told it was the source file, but when you look at it you can see that in the source segment I've actually got German words. These may not be really good German words, and that's because I have anonymized the file by doing a little bit of pseudo translation on the original texts, so they sort of look German but they're not German. And the same for the English. You'll see that it looks English but it makes no sense at all. It's just so that I can distinguish it. So what's happened here is the translator has opened the original English XML using the any XML file type, which is the default file type, translated, and it has overwritten the source with the German target. And what should have happened is the target should have gone in here, in between. It should have said Kleiner in here, like that. That's what it should have said. But they didn't do that. So, in order to do that, we have to go through a few exercises. Don't save any changes. So the first thing I'm going to do is try and recover the original source file. And to do that, I can open up the SDLX list they gave me, because this was the original bilingual file that was translated by the translator. So it doesn't matter that it's used an incorrect file type. I should have the basis of being able to recreate the original file. So when the file opens up, you can see I know that the default file type was used, because if I click on the view mode up here and make sure that I'm working in tag ID mode like this, then what that does is the orange tab at the top here, this tells me the file type that was used. And in this case, they've used the any XML file type, the default one. So anybody who has Studio will be able to save the target file or save the source file, because they all have the same file type. They did not customize it, which is what should have happened for this particular file. So I can then click on File, Advanced Save, Save Source As, and get the English. I'll just call it English XML. And while I'm at it, if I wanted to, I could also create a translation memory from this SDLX list file, which might be useful. So I'll just show you very quickly how to do that. In case you didn't know, I'm sure you all do, but just in case, I click on Create New File-Based Translation Memory. I'll call it EN US to DE United States to Germany. That's the other interesting thing to note. When we looked in the XML file, it was English Canada. So the translator, I guess, was using a piece of software that didn't allow them to do that, and they've used an English US translation memory with the English Canadian file. Nothing wrong with that with the XML file, because so long as they only have to return a target file, as long as they don't overwrite the language attributes, which did happen with some of the files I saw that came back in some of the other languages, then it really doesn't matter. So English United States to English Germany, I'm going to use the same languages that don't match the XML file, so that I'm matching what the translator gave me. It will just be easier in the long run. So I'll finish there. There's my translation memory. And all I would do then is I run a batch task to update the main translation memories. So next, I tick draft just in case, because I just really want to get the contents of the file. So in case they hadn't confirmed everything, I can just make sure I get everything, and I'll just update the main translation memory. That's done, and if I do reopen the file, you can see that I've now got a translation memory attached. So I'm getting a result up there under Kleiner. And if I move down here, you can see I'm now getting bytes and files. I don't know what that means. Now this is an interesting one. So I've got 4 results here. So I've got same source, 4 different targets. One's a context match and the other 3 are 100% matches. Now I actually tried to reproduce the problem that I pointed out in the blog. And I did that by simply adding in a couple of other vinyl weeks. So you can see there's another one down here. and changing the target translation in each case. And it saved 4 different translations for me. But what I just completely forgot about is Studio's pretty clever. And so you can see that here it's giving me the correct one of those 4. Is the one at the top. If I move back up to this one over here, which has been split into 3 words, you'll see that that will change, and now I'm using the correct one there. And that's because Studio recognizes the context of the segment. The problem I encountered was because the translator had either used a different tool to do the translation, in which case we don't have any context in order to play with, or they've added it as a new translation. So as soon as I add this as a new translation, the same one, watch what happens. Now I get a duplicate penalty because I've got multiple translations to choose from, and Studio has no way of being able to tell me which one it should actually be, because I added a different translation for the same segment, or just didn't hold the context information. So you can see that's why, for me, using the translation memory on the real files wasn't an acceptable solution. If I'd actually made the mistake myself and I'd done all of the work on Studio, using the translation memory would have been a perfect solution. But I can't do that with the files that I've actually got. So I'm going to close that, and I'm not going to use the translation memory. And I'm also going to remove that project and get rid of it again because I pre-translated it. Get rid of that, get rid of that, and I shall open the file again in a second. And that's because the first thing I want to do, now that I've got my translation memory and I've got the English, is I need to populate the target with the content of the source. And to do that, actually, I'm not going to use Editpad Pro, which I normally use for this stuff. I'm going to use Notepad++. This is a free tool which you can go and get. If you don't have a good text editor, I can recommend this one if you don't want to pay for something like Editpad Pro, which I personally prefer. But this is also a really good tool. Very similar, in fact. So all I need to do in order to get that in there is I can apply the regular expression which I put in the blog article here. So if you come here and copy this, be careful when you do it, because in fact, if you take this first, look, the bottom bit, because I had to put a carriage return at the end of the first line in order to make it fit. Otherwise, it just ran off the edge across there. And that means that you need to put that bit in first, then go back and pick up the rest from there like that, and just copy and paste that before the target. So here. So now I've got the whole thing. So what that should do is when I click on Find Next, it should find all of the source and all of the target elements just a pair at a time and work its way through the document. And then I'm going to replace that with this patterned text. Now the idea behind this patterned text, I'll show you, I'll explain on here. Perhaps I can make this a bit bigger. On here I can. One more. Yep, there we go. The idea behind this is that these are called back references. Now the $1 refers to the first stuff inside brackets, which is all of that. So when it finds that, it remembers it as $1. Then I have this another little bit inside brackets here. This is the translatable text in the source element, and it remembers that as $2. Then the next bit, I took the source target, or the source right to the end, and go around the line feed and down to the target XML, to the very end of that, and that is the third bit. And then the fourth bit is the target again. That would be the fourth bit here. But notice I have a $2 in the middle of this, which is where the target text should go. So I've basically taken a copy of the source text, $2, and repeated it in the target text. So that's what the replace exercise is going to do. It's going to find everything. So if I move this out of the way a little bit and we do a find next, see it's found all of that. It's going to copy all of that, and then it's going to replace it again. except it's going to replace it with that cell repeated in there. So let me show you how that works. If I just do the first one and then replace it, when I hit the replace button, watch and you'll see cell appears in that target. There we go, and then it moves on to the next one, then I can replace that one too. There we go. So nice and straightforward. I'm just going to undo that because otherwise I'll end up with something incorrect, and I'm going to replace them all in the open documents like that. That's gone through. I can close it, and it's now replaced all of it, so I have a copy of the source text in the target element. And what that means is now I'm in a position to be able to translate the target element, just the target element, and when I've translated it, the translated text will appear in there, and then my target file will contain the source and it will contain the target. And that's how this file should have been prepared for translation in the first place. Now, before I close this, with Notepad++, it remembers the changes but doesn't apply them until I save it. So you can see that little save disk is in red. So I need to click Control S and then it goes blue. The file's saved and I can close it. So if I come back to here, let's just open it again, just open it with my editor. You can see I've got the source target all the way down, all fully populated. So perfect, I'm ready to go. So what I do now is I could just open it, and if I just open it, let me show you what happens. Keep in mind that we've now got source and target populated. When I open this file, I won't set the languages correctly just yet. When I open that file, everything's perfect. And the reason that's perfect is because I didn't want it to be perfect. It's because I already have the file type here. I'm going to remove it all. In fact, I'm going to remove it altogether because I want to create it from scratch so you can see how it's done. Okay, so I didn't create a custom file type. Wasn't too smart, was it? What you'll see, just to reinforce what I was saying about the elements, the AnyXML file type should open up all of the elements. So I should get a duplication here because I've got the source text written into the source and the target elements. So what I'm seeing now is cell, December, vine on week, achieved, minimum, etc. right the way through the file. And this is not what I want. So I want to create a custom file type that will allow me to translate this properly and only tackle the target element. And the other thing I want to do in here is tackle this sort of a problem where there are embedded codes in the file. This should not have been brought into the file at all. And in fact, if we looked at when we looked at the original translation in the STL-XLIF file, the translator actually translated these. So I imagine when the file went back, and even if it was correct, this would no longer work in the intended application. They should not be translated. I'm pretty sure of that. And the other thing is, we see these %S. These are also placeables. They should be tagged. These are little bits of code that the intended application is looking to see, and I can tell you that these are also translated sometimes, and that shouldn't have happened either. So I need to make sure they're tags. So my custom file type has to do things: create a rule to only take out the target text, and create some rules to tag it up appropriately. So let's go File, Options, New, and I'm going to create an XML legacy embedded content. The reason I'm picking that one, I could pick the new one, but the old one just allows me to create a couple of regex rules, regular expression rules, which is all I need for this file, in a very simple way without having to deal with two file types. So that's why I've chosen to use this one, XML movie. And what I do is I tend to take a copy of the file type name and put it into the file type identifier, because this is the identifier that is populated in that orange tab, so you can see which file type you've used, and then it just gives you a little bit of comfort that you're using the right file type. So I could create the rules from scratch, but I'm going to define them based on my file type. So I pick the English one. It might just save me a little bit of time because it brings in all of the elements. Make sure I get the right root element, which helps with the identification of the file if you have multiple XML files, which I do. So that's my file type created. If I was to open the file type now, I'd get the same as the AnyXML. And that's because all the parser rules are in there. So I don't want any of these rules. The only one I'm interested in is the target element, because that's what I want to populate. So if I edit that and just say always translatable, say OK, and I'm going to add one other rule here, a little XPath rule. This is XPath, by the way. See, / target is XPath. It's pretty straightforward. So I'm going to go / and use a wildcard, which means any element, and make it not translatable. Seems like a bit of a contradiction in terms, but what I'm saying is don't pull anything out of the file whatsoever. So start with a blank sheet, then process the next rule, which is just give me the target. So there should be no doubt I'm only getting the target. So if I was to just very quick test, just open the English file now, I should now just be getting one of those words, not duplicate as we did before. I am, which is perfect. So that's the first bit taken care of, and these are all the target elements as well. This is not the source this time. I'm taking them from the target because that was the rule that I set. The next thing I want to do is to deal with these elements. And so to do that, what I have to do is I have to give a little bit of structure to the rule. So this column over here on the right hand side that's currently empty is called the document structure column. So if I close that, I'm just going to use a shortcut, Alt-FT, Alt-F-T. I'll do it quicker in future just to get back to the file type, because when you're messing around it's very quick just to go in and out this way. To give this rule a bit of structure, and I'll do that first and then I'll explain why I'm going to give it the structure. I can edit the rule, and you see the structure info. I come down here and edit it, and I add a bit of structure. I can pick whatever I like. I'm going to use paragraph. So this will put a P in each of those columns for every separate translation unit, every target element that contains text. Click on OK, OK, and OK. You can see now I have paragraph written here for structure. And the reason I'm doing that is because in order to deal with that tagged content, I have to tag it up. And the way that works is by using the embedded content processor. So I click on that, and then I click on Enable Embedded Content Processing. And then I have to tell it which rules I want to apply this to. I just created this rule, target, with the paragraph context. So if I come back to here and I add, see, it's asking me for the same structure information, and I add paragraph. Every rule I now apply to this will affect the paragraph segments, and they are the target segments, which is exactly what I want. So I can add a rule in here using regular expressions. The %s is dead simple. I can just write it as text because that's what it is. That's it. I've created the first rule, and that will protect my the text that where it says %s. I will get a tag instead of the word %s, which will prevent the translator from doing anything incorrectly with that. Then for the next one, I can't remember what I did, so I'm just going to quickly fire up Regex Buddy, which is the tool I like to use for doing things like this. And I created all these rules before, and that was the one I want. There were more in the real file type, but this is the only one I want for this one. So I'm just going to copy and paste this. I'm sorry if that was a bit quick. Paste that in there, and that should pick up that product ID code that we saw in the file type. In fact, because that's the only content inside that particular segment, it shouldn't show up at all when I open the file up this time. So if I click on OK, then open up the file, English XML. We'll do it right this time. So we'll go English United States to Germany. So that's the file opened up. You can see actually in the first, I can't remember which segment it was, but it was certainly on the first screen at the beginning. I've no longer got that code, and I guess if I go down to the bottom where the other stuff was, I've got the tags. Now, I've noticed something interesting while I'm looking at that, and the first thing I'm noticing is that there were actually 3 tags there. There was one at the end, and there was definitely some more up here where the tags were just at the end. So what I need to do is make sure that all of those tags are internal and included in the text, just in case the word order changes. Because if I just move them externally and the order of the words changed in the target segment, you wouldn't be able to do it. So I need to make sure all of those tags are properly visible. So I'm going to go back to the file type settings. So I'll close that. Alt F-T. And I need to come to my S, edit it. Click on advanced, and in here, segmentation I can include with text. Okay. So this time when I open the file up, let me go English United States to German Germany. This time I should be able to see all of those tags. So I scroll down the bottom. There we go. So there's one at the beginning there that disappeared. I've got this one at the end which has come back. If I scroll up and down, there's probably some more in that, I'm sure. Oh, there we go. There's a few more as well. So all those were missing because they were at the end. Now they're visible. If I go back to my view and I change the tag type to full tag text, you can see that these are the %S. But I like to work with tag ID. So we come back up at the beginning. You can see there it says XML movie, so I know I've been using the right type, the right file type. Now, instead of using the translation memory, I'm just going to go straight to perfect match. So this allows me to make sure that I recover the file in the correct format. And then actually there's one more thing I forgot to do. Although it's actually, I don't really need to do it. It's less relevant because now I'm taking the correct element. But in the files type settings, I'll just show this anyway under writer. You see this XML lang attribute values. Some of the files that I saw returned by the translators, for example, this English to Spanish Mexican, the English CEA, English Canadian, had been overwritten by Spanish Mexican. And that's because they translated the source element, overwrote it, and then changed the matching source language to the target language. So the XML file ended up being source English Mexican and target English Mexican, with only content in the source, which was an even bigger mess. So touching on that will make sure that doesn't happen. In my instance, in this circumstance, it doesn't really matter because I'm extracting the text from the target element, and if I overwrite it, it's only going to get it overwritten to English German, which is what it's English German to German Germany, DE, which is what it's supposed to be anyway. So it's less relevant for this particular one. So I'm just going to leave that on do not change. Only affects when you're writing, and actually it would only affect this project now if I changed it in the project settings rather than the file type options. But as I said, it should be irrelevant for this one. So I now want to match this. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to match it with the original STLXLIF file that was provided by the translator. So I'm going to click on Batch Tasks and Apply Perfect Match. It's a really nice feature, this. Click on Next, and I can go and pick the specific document I want, which was the German STLXLIF. There it is. And I have two options. I can click on Apply Perfect Match and Lock. And if I do that, everything that's been perfect matched, that we're absolutely certain is exactly the same, will receive a PM status for perfect match, and this segment will be locked. So that means the only things I have to deal with are the things that have changed slightly, and I can very easily work through the file. That's actually what I returned to the project manager I was dealing with. And then later on when I was looking at it, I wished I hadn't done that, but I just ran out of time and didn't have time to do it all again. And the reason for that is because in the end what he actually wanted was to be able to review the translations. So I shouldn't have locked everything else and given it perfect match. I should have used this option to use the original translation origin and status, and this would have meant that it mapped exactly the original STLXLIF. I should have given them that file. I'm sorry about that. Cameron, if you're listening, hopefully it wasn't too much of a problem after I unlocked everything and set it to a translated status. You just had the PM thing in the middle. So I'm going to use this original translation origin and status and finish. So that's completed. And if I reopen the file, it should now be all fully translated, except for, with exactly the same status as it was before, which it is. It was just translated with no match values or anything. If they did have match values, you'd see the original match values here as well. It's a pretty neat feature. But this one didn't, and I suspect that that's because I don't believe the translator did the work in studio. I think that was part of the reasons why they had the problem with the multiple the multiple matching as well, because if I'd done all that in studio would have been able to distinguish between the context matches and the 100% matches, and unless they'd actually added additional translations, which I don't believe they did, and unless they'd done that, I would have had no problem trying to complete it just from the translation memory. Anyway, if I scroll down here now, if I don't even need to scroll down, if I click on review and just look for unconfirmed here, that will show me the ones that have not been matched. And in my small sample, these are all the ones that are tagged, and it's quite clear that that was bound to be the case because the original ones were translated. It would be quite easy for me to sort these out because I could go into the project settings and add the translation memory that we created, and now I should get a fuzzy match from this, especially if I make sure that should be plenty, 70. So there you go, you can see, so I'm getting it exactly. All I'm missing is the tag. So you can see they translated it before with %L, clearly the wrong thing to do. So I can just apply the translation, and then what I would do is I just take that and replace it with the tag and then confirm. So actually it's pretty straightforward to fix it because I can see what's happened. If I was a quicker translator, if I was a translator, this would be much better. This one is an awful mess, but it's still Control 1. In fact, it's found me a concordance result there actually, but this will do, and I need to copy and paste it because it's a concordance. Well, no, I don't need to do that. See, I'll show you something else. What I should be able to do is start typing it. There we go. So I can place my concordance that way. I've got a lowercase, so I don't know why that is. I think I just hit the lowercase v. And what I can do now is replace the translated bits with the correct. I'll just pick them like this. There's some various ways you can do it. I think it's a bit hard trying to tell because, as I said before, this is complete nonsense. It's all pseudo-translate and it's not real German. Not that I've been faring an awful lot better if it was. And then I can take the last one. Gosh, it's taken me a long time to correct that, hasn't it? Good job I'm not a real translator. I get sacked. Okay, I want a space. There we go. So that will be done, and then I go back to all segments. Now I can save my target file. German, but I'm going to put real German so I don't overwrite the original one, just so we can have a quick look at the difference. I close that, but I'll save the changes. When I come back to here and I look at the real German, what I have is English, German, English, German, English, German, English, German, English, German, right through the file. And if I come back to the original, you can see I don't, I just have Kleiner. So you can see the difference. Let me just get to the top of the file for each one. So they look the same. There we go. You can see the differences. So that was the original. I've only got German populated into the English source, and what it should have been is English source should have stayed in the English source, and German target should have been in the target. So it was all down to preparing the files, but we have been able to correct it by going through that little process. So that took me a whole lot longer to show you than I wanted to, probably because I talk too much and get sidetracked all over the place. About half an hour to go through, roughly, to go through that process from start to finish with a bit of an explanation. So not too long and definitely achievable in terms of being able to correct it. And now the files are available for the project manager to get them reviewed and saved correctly. Hope that was helpful.